Hello there, you are watching L24 World News Program live here from the capital Algiers. With me, I'm Abdurrahim Kashour, and these are today's top stories. The cruiser Moskva flagship of the Black Sea Fleet having been severely damaged by an explosion of munitions. Russia's defense ministry said that 1,026 soldiers of Ukraine's 36th Marine Brigade, including 162 officers, have surrendered in the besieged Ukraine port city of Mariupol. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said despite the restriction on the Kremlin's social media posts, the ministry can completely rely only on the domestic online platforms. Somalia's parliament will swear in an estimated 200 newly elected legislators today in Mogadishu. Russian Defense Ministry said all crew members of the ship had been evacuated and that cause of the explosion is being investigated. Russia's defense ministry said that 1,026 soldiers of Ukraine's 36th Marine Brigade, including 162 officers, have surrendered in the besieged Ukraine port city of Mariupol. Russian television on Wednesday broadcast clips of what it said was the surrender. In the footage, unarmed men in military fatigues were visible walking with their hands up along a grass and tree-lined path toward masked soldiers cradle assault rifles. Mariupol Mayor Vladimir Baykosh on Wednesday alleged Russia has used chemical weapons in his city. Baykosh said that Russian forces had hit some Ukrainian soldiers with chemical weapons but did not give further details of their conditions or the weapons used.
The day before yesterday, Russian forces attempted to carry out what is called a chemical attack on our city and tried to drop these chemical weapons on our men, and it did hit our guys. And there are testimonies of several people from surrounding villages near the city. They sensed a sweet taste in their mouth. It scared some residents in nearby villages, and young men and women started leaving these villages near the city because it became unsafe.
The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that despite the restrictions on the Kremlin's social media posts, the ministry can completely rely on the domestic online platforms. Last week, Twitter blocked the ministry's post about the deaths of civilians in the Kyiv suburbs of Bucha.
I want to stress that despite such a policy of Western services, we will keep using their opportunities in our information work, strictly within our legislative framework. Of course, at the same time, it's obvious we can completely rely only on our domestic online platforms and communication and technological decisions.
Russian army threatens to strike command centers in Ukrainian capital Kiev, which Moscow has given up on taking for the time being, accusing Ukraine of shooting and sabotage on Russian territory.
We see attempts at sabotage and strikes by Ukrainian forces on targets on the territory of the Russian Federation. If such events continue, strikes will be carried out by the Russian military on decision-making centers, including Kyiv, which the Russian military has refrained from doing so far.
The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, the British Karim Khan, visits the scene of the mass grave of Bucha near Kiev, where hundreds of civilians, according to the Ukrainian authorities, were found dead after the Russian withdrawal. Khan announced that the ICC forensic team is preparing to work so that we can separate the truth from fiction, to emphasize the right of every individual to have their life protected and not to be targeted unnecessarily.
Every individual, particularly civilians, They have certain rights, and we must speak for them, and we must insist that we get to the truth of what's taken place, and then judges will decide if there's responsibility. If there are crimes, judges have to decide whether or not warrants or summonses should be issued, but we need to go step by step, and this is part of that. We have a team also. They're not here because of the cameras. Forensic scientists, forensic anthropologists, analysts, investigators and lawyers, so that we can really make sure we separate truth from fiction and go forward to insist on the right of every individual, every child, every woman and every man to have their lives protected and not wantonly targeted.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky calls on the European Union to stop sponsoring the Russian military machine and impose an oil embargo on Russia. Mr. Zelensky also discussed in a call with US President Joe Biden the prosecution of the Russian military and commanders who have committed war crimes.
First of all, we need an oil embargo and Europe's clear readiness to give up all Russian energy. The European Union must stop sponsoring Russia's military machine. I spoke today with the US President Biden. Among the topics of conversation, the prosecution of all Russian servicemen and commanders who committed war crimes, international cooperation for this.
Pentagon spokesman John Kirby says $800 million military assistance package for Ukraine, including weapons, ammunition, armored personnel carriers and helicopters approved by the President Biden, which is planned to meet Ukraine's urgent needs for the fight.
Today, the President announced and authorized another presidential drawdown of security assistance valued at up to an additional $800 million, tailored to meet urgent Ukrainian needs for today's fight as Russian forces shift the focus of their ruthless aggression now to eastern Ukraine.
A new package of defense support for Ukraine was discussed, agreed for $800 million, weapons, ammunition, other assistance, artillery systems, armored personnel carriers, and propellers. I'm truly thankful for this support. We also agreed to tighten sanctions against Russia.
White House spokesperson Jan Psaki said that during a press briefing that US President Joe Biden has called Russia's actions in Ukraine genocide because every day it becomes clearer that Putin's goal is to erase the idea of being Ukrainian. However, the United States did not yet move forward on the legal process to prove it.
Well, he called it a genocide yesterday, not once, but twice, actually, because, as he said yesterday, it's becoming clearer and clearer each day that it is Putin's aim to wipe out the idea of being Ukrainian, that we're seeing greater brutality increase day by day. And some of that, I will note, is because we're gaining greater access to areas. We have more intelligence on what's happening in areas. Leaders are speaking out more about it. And frankly, there's also reporting about what is happening on the ground. There is a legal process, as the president said yesterday, that will be undergone and will happen. And he wasn't getting ahead of that. He was speaking to what he feels we see on the ground. But regardless of what you call it, what our objective now is evidenced by the enormous package of military assistance we put out today, is continue to help and assist the Ukrainians in this war, and one where we see atrocities happening every single day.
Is there any concern?
China's position vis-à-vis Russia threatens its integration into the global economy. U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen warned on Wednesday, calling for reforms to major global economic institutions such as the IMF.
Whatever China's geopolitical aims and strategies, we see no benign interpretation of Russia's invasion, nor of its consequences for the international order. China cannot expect the global community to respect its appeals to the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity in the future if it does not respect these principles now when it counts. China has recently affirmed a special relationship with Russia. I fervently hope that China will make something positive of this relationship and help to end this war. Going forward, it will be increasingly difficult to separate economic issues from broader considerations of national interest, including national security. The world's attitude towards China and its willingness to embrace further economic integration may well be affected by China's reaction to our call for resolute action on Russia.
The three Baltic states leaders and Polish president were received in Kiev by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for a working lunch after traveling to Bordianka, a small town near the capital, pounded and destroyed by the Russian troops.
The heads of the three Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, alongside the Polish President Andrzej Duda, have been received by President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev to discuss increasing military support for Ukraine. Polish President Andrzej Duda believes that Russia is not waging a simple war in Ukraine, but is guilty of terrorism and cruelty.
I said to President Volodymyr Zelensky and to our colleagues, this is not war, this is terrorism. If someone sends planes and soldiers to bomb residential areas and kill civilians, this is not war, this is cruelty, banditry, terrorism. This is the face of Russian aggression against Ukraine, which we must never accept.
Latvian president, for his part, affirmed that Ukraine is fighting for democracy and for Europe.
Ukraine is fighting for Europe when Ukraine is fighting for democracy and when Ukraine is fighting for us.
Gitanas Nausėda, president of Lithuania, expressed his deepest respect for Ukrainians, which he described as heroes.
Let me express my deepest respect to the Ukrainian nation and to President Volodymyr Zelensky. You are true heroes.
In turn, President Volodymyr Zelensky expressed skepticism concerning Germany's position and affirmed that Ukraine did not receive any official visit request from them.
As President, our office has not officially received a request from the President of Germany and the Office of the President of Germany for a visit to Ukraine. We are a free country and we are ready to be a state transit for economic matters, not for political matters.
This visit comes before the start of the second phase of the Russian special military operation in Ukraine, which will be focusing on liberating the Donbas region from the neo-Nazis, according to the Russian authorities.
German economists are forecasting a recession in Europe's largest financial system if Russia gas provided have been to cease, and the results may unfold by the way of the continent. In the biannual Giants economic forecast printed Wednesday, Germany's 5 greatest financial establishments sharply diminished their gross home product forecast as the battle in Ukraine slows the restoration from COVID-19. Finnish MPs and the former Prime Minister discussed Finland's potential NATO bid ahead of parliamentary debate in the Nordic country. The Russian military operation in Ukraine on February 24th caused a dramatic shift in Finnish public opinion regarding the long-held policy of military non-alignment.
Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin and her Swedish counterpart Magdalena Andersson held a press conference in Stockholm on the procedures underway in each country to consider future NATO membership.
Of course, there are both pros and cons with being member of NATO, as there are pros and cons of other security choices. Being a member of NATO, you do have the security with Article 5 within NATO, no question about it. That is not something you have in other arrangements. At the same time, you also have another responsibility towards other countries.
Finnish defense and foreign ministers present key report on its strategic situation after Russia's military operation in Ukraine, prelude to a debate on a now probable historic NATO candidacy starting from now until summer. The report does not make recommendations but stresses that without NATO membership, Finland does not have any security guarantees despite being an alliance partner.
I won't give any kind of timetable when we will make our decisions, but I think it will happen quite fast, within weeks, not within months.
An open parliamentary debate on membership is scheduled for next Wednesday. Paradoxal war launched by Moscow by invoking the extension of the Western military alliance to its doors risks tipping one of its neighbors into the ranks of NATO to benefit from the decisive protection of its famous Article 5.
I don't want to go to the details. Of course, there are many kind of risks involved. Also to the period when we are thinking what kind of choices we should make. Of course, there are many risks.
The Swedes react to the opening of parliamentary debates in Finland on a potential candidacy for NATO and explain that their country should follow the same path as Finland, which is their close neighbor.
The French presidential candidate Marine Le Pen intends to leave NATO integrated command if elected. France can only be useful if it is independent, she said at a press conference in Paris.
France can be useful to the settlement of the great disorders of the world if it is only independent. This is a paradox that is poorly understood by the globalists, but that we nationals know ourselves to be an eternal truth. That's one of the reasons I'm leaving the NATO integrated command. The equidistance that comes from this independent posture is to understand the world before judging it through the short-sighted glasses of ideology, to understand the geopolitics of nations without condemning it outright.
The Zionist attacks in the West Bank continues for the fifth day in a row. 17 Palestinian people, including teenagers, have been killed, which pushed the Palestinians to take the streets in Ramallah and erupt against the Zionist raids.
According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, a Palestinian lawyer and a teenager have been killed on the fifth day of the Zionist raids early on Thursday, while 3 others were killed on Wednesday following the Zionist attacks in the West Bank.
Human rights lawyer Mohammed Hassan Mohammed Assaf, who was 34, died after being shot in the chest by the Zionist occupier during the aggression on the city of Nablus in the northern West Bank.
Palestinian deaths brought to 17 victims in the ongoing escalation. Demonstrators had erupted earlier in the day in Nablus, where Zionist forces were escorting a work crew that came to repair Joseph's tomb.
Today, this march responds to the call of our people and our brothers in Jenin and Nablus, and to a rejection of all policies of execution on the ground, murder and ethnic cleansing, and an affirmation of the journey of the martyrs towards victory and freedom.
The occupied troops battling through the city's streets in an armored convoy opened fire as a crowd pelted them with rocks.
We went out today to say that Palestinian blood is indivisible. Palestinian blood is one, from Rafah to Jenin, and even from Ramallah to Al-Quds. Palestinian blood is one. We cannot allow the Zionist occupation and the right-wing Zionist government to isolate our people in Jenin. We say to our people of Jenin, your blood is our blood.
The office of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas accused the Zionist entity of destabilizing the West Bank, saying that the situation has become dangerous and delicate and is fast escalating.
Today in Mogadishu, Somalia's parliament will swear in an estimated 200 freshly elected MPs following the February elections. The parliamentary electoral process dragged on for 4 months, owing primarily to political congestion caused by the conflicts between President Mohammed Abdullahi Mohammed and the Prime Minister Mohammed Hussein Roble. Sri Lanka's Prime Minister has offered talks with protesters calling for the government to step down over its handling of an economic crisis, as the opposition threatens to bring a no-confidence motion against it in a parliament. Thousands of people have taken to the streets, many staging a sit in the commercial capital Colombo to denounce the government led by President Gotabaya and his elder brother, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. The United Kingdom is to send migrants and asylum seekers who cross the English Channel thousands of miles away to Rwanda, according to a controversial deal announced Thursday. Boris Johnson is expected to announce a round of measures, including putting the Navy in charge of channel operations from Friday and a new reception centre to hold people attempting to enter the UK. Suspect of New York subway attack was arrested, identified as Mr. Frank James, faces a life sentence in prison. James is suspected of shooting 33 bullets on people in Brooklyn subway. Nabil Khazini.
A 30-hour manhunt for a suspect of committing the worst attack on New York's subway system in years ended by police arresting Mr. James, the suspect of shooting 10 people on a subway train in Brooklyn on Tuesday. The 62-year-old was taken into custody on Wednesday afternoon in Manhattan.
Moments ago, Frank Robert James was stopped on the street and arrested by members of the New York City Police Department. Officers, in response to a Crime Stoppers tip, stopped Mr. James.
Already known to justice, the suspect, who was wearing a gas mask, ignited two devices that smoked the wagon, then shot the passengers. According to the authorities, 33 bullets were fired. Frank James faces a federal terrorism charge.
He has been apprehended. He will be arraigned in federal court in Brooklyn, and if convicted, he will face a sentence of up to life imprisonment.
A day after the incident, the atmosphere in New York's subway has changed. New Yorkers now fear similar attacks.
It's horrible, and I mean, it goes to show that, we definitely need more security on these subway stations, and, it's definitely nerve-wracking, that it could be any one of us commuting to work from day to day.
The suspect had already been arrested 9 times in New York, but not for felonies. This is the reason he would have been able to buy a gun legally in Ohio.
To a different matter now, Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune receives French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian in the presence of the Algerian Foreign Minister Mr. Ramtan Lamamra. Le Drian visits to Algeria aims to strengthen bilateral relations between the two countries and to address the current international and regional crisis. Houses and stores were set on fire, and any who attempted to leave or shelter were hunted and shot by the assailants. The death toll from village assaults in Nigeria's Plateau State has risen to 154, with an estimated 4,800 people fleeing their homes in fear of additional bloodshed. Villagers were ambushed by gunmen on motorcycles who fired sporadically into houses and shops. To sport now, Liverpool advanced to the Champions League semi-final against Villarreal after surviving a late collapse in Wednesday 3-3 draw with Benfica. Jurgen Klopp's side already had one foot in the last 4 after winning 3-0 or 3-1 in the quarter-final first leg in Lisbon.
Never happen. I take something like this for granted. I'm really, really happy. And yeah, that's it pretty much. Said it now a couple of times. I know we will talk about the game and the things that happened, the goals we conceded, and all these kind of things. But on a day when I'm not over the moon about qualifying for the Champions League semi-final, then something is really wrong. Maybe it would be the right time just to quit. We are 3-1 up on aggregate 6-2. It's an incredibly busy period. Some of the boys didn't play for a while, 90 minutes, so that's then the next step. And all of you think, we are human beings, we are like this, you think, okay, job done. And Benfica was still on fire. And I respect that a lot. They scored really good goals. It's not that easy against us. It should not be that easy as it was tonight. But Benfica deserved the 3 goals.
With Champions League nights, we come to an end, and this is a reminder for our main top stories. The cruiser Moskva flagship of the Black Sea Fleet having been severely damaged by an explosion of munitions. Russia's defense ministry said that 1,026 soldiers of Ukraine's 36th Marine Brigade, including 162 officers, has surrendered in the besieged Ukraine port city of Mariupol. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said despite the restriction on the Kremlin's social media posts, the ministry can completely rely only on the domestic online platforms. Somalia's parliament will swear in an estimated 200 newly elected legislators today in Mogadishu. And with this, our news ends. Thank you so much for being with us. Take care of yourself and have a blessed evening.